The cargo bay lights flickered again. Above Elias Vane's head, buzzing like dying insects trapped inside metal cages. He glanced upward from beneath the half-open engine panel and sighed deeply. Wonderful, he muttered. Now even the lights are giving up on this ship. From somewhere behind him came the sharp mechanical voice of his navigation unit. Correction, the lights gave up approximately 3 years ago. Elias wiped grease across his jaw as he slid out from beneath the overheating plasma converter. The inside of his freighter smelled like burned wiring, stale coffee, and disappointment. Mostly disappointment. Outside the cockpit window, the mining moon of Kareth 9 rotated beneath the station docks like a wounded gray stone. Floating through darkness, cargo shuttles drifted around massive industrial towers while neon advertisements flashed endlessly across the station walls. Join the Imperial Navy, serve the Queen, survive longer than a week. Tempting, Elias said, but I already work in a dangerous environment. His ship groaned loudly. The navigation unit answered immediately. Agreed. Elias grabbed a metal wrench and pointed it threateningly toward the ceiling speaker. One day I'm replacing your sarcasm. Ship. You cannot afford replacement parts. That's exactly why I hate you. A loud explosion echoed somewhere outside the docking sector. Nobody reacted. On Kareth 9, explosions were treated more like weather forecasts than emergencies. Elias climbed into the cockpit and dropped into the pilot chair with the exhaustion of a man who had lost arguments with machines his entire adult life. A holographic debt report blinked in front of him immediately. Warning: unpaid fuel taxes unpaid. Docking fees unpaid. Oxygen recycling license. How is oxygen taxed? Elias whispered. The navigation unit paused dramatically before answering. Because governments are creative. Before Elias could respond, every screen inside the cockpit suddenly turned crimson red. Imperial emergency symbols appeared across the displays. The entire station fell silent for several seconds before a cold female voice echoed through every channel. Attention, citizens of the Empire. By royal decree, all civilian routes near the Grave Spiral are now restricted. Elias frowned immediately. The Grave Spiral, even smugglers avoided saying the name too loudly. A hologram slowly materialized above the control console. Queen Lyri herself appeared in shimmering blue light. Elias had seen her before in military broadcasts, but never this close. She stood tall in silver ceremonial armor lined with glowing patterns that moved faintly like living starlight. Her pale face remained calm despite the tension in her sharp silver eyes. Long, elegant ears extended through strands of white blonde hair resting over her shoulders. The room itself seemed quieter around her. A royal flagship, the Solaris Crown, has been stolen by enemies of the Empire, she announced. Several military fleets sent to recover it have failed. Behind her stood grim admirals avoiding eye contact. The criminal zone beyond the Grave Spiral is now considered a death region. Any unauthorized vessel entering the sector will not receive Imperial protection. Elias leaned back slowly. Military fleets failed, he murmured. That sounds expensive. The navigation unit replied instantly. Statistically speaking, it also sounds fatal. The Queen continued speaking, while star maps rotated beside her. Hologram, the individual responsible for recovering the Solaris crown will be rewarded beyond measure, beyond measure. Elia sat upright suddenly. Now she has my attention. A loud banging suddenly erupted against the side hatch of his ship. Elia's voice screamed outside. Open the door before the station inspector scanned my cargo. Elias groaned. That usually means organs or illegal weapons. Or both, the navigation unit added. Helpfully, the hatch slid open, revealing Brack. Massive blue-skinned trader carrying 3 stolen reactor batteries beneath his coat very badly. One battery slipped out immediately and hit the floor. Brack froze. Elias stared at the battery. Brack stared at Elias. Yeah, I can explain. You know, Elias said calmly, most people hide illegal cargo before knocking. Brack scratched his bald head awkwardly. I was in a hurry. Outside the station windows, distant Imperial warships moved silently through the stars toward the darkness of the grave spiral, and for reasons Elias could not explain, he kept staring at them. Brack carefully pushed the fallen reactor battery behind his foot as if that somehow made the situation legal. Elias crossed his arms. You brought stolen military batteries onto my ship. They are not stolen, Brack argued. Immediately, they were abandoned. The Imperial logo is still glowing on them. That proves nothing. The navigation unit suddenly spoke through the ceiling speaker. Correction, that proves ownership. Brack pointed angrily upward. I hate your ship. Get in line, Elias replied. Outside the docking station, warning sirens echoed faintly through the massive metal corridors. Several Imperial destroyers drifted away from Carries 9, their engines glowing blue against the darkness. Everyone on the station knew where they were heading, the grave spiral. And everyone knew most of them would never return. Brack finally lowered his voice. Listen carefully. I came because I heard something that usually ends badly. This time it may end profitably. Elias paused. That is my favorite kind of danger. Brack leaned closer. 3 nights ago, a damaged smuggler vessel arrived from Sector Null. Crew half dead. They kept talking about a giant silver ship hidden inside the spiral. Elias frowned immediately. The Solaris crown. Brack nodded slowly. And they mentioned something else. The cartels are searching for someone. Who? A human. Elias blinked once. That's concerning. There are billions of humans. Yes, but statistically I attract problems. The navigation unit answered instantly. Confirmed. Brack activated a small holographic device. A distorted star map appeared between them, flickering with interference. Several sectors near the grave spiral pulsed red. The smugglers claim the royal ship isn't destroyed. Brack whispered, someone is trying to activate it. Elias stared at the map carefully. His joking expression faded slightly. Every route marked on the hologram avoided the main military pass. Smuggling routes hidden. Entrances dead zones. Someone inside. The spiral knew exactly how Imperial fleets operated. That's why the Navy keeps failing. Elias murmured. Brack narrowed his eyes. What? The military moves like soldiers. Predictable formations, heavy scanners. Big fleets. Elias pointed toward the map. Criminals see them coming days away. The navigation unit processed the information for a moment. Probability of Survival entering alone remains catastrophically low. Elias ignored it. Outside the cockpit window, another broadcast suddenly appeared across the station screens. Queen Lyrie stood before the Imperial Senate this time, the silver markings on her armor reflected against enormous marble walls behind her. Several alien senators argued loudly around her. She has lost control of the border sectors. The Solaris crown should never have left the capital. Entire fleets are disappearing. Queen Lyrie remained motionless while the room collapsed into political chaos. Around her, her long pale ears twitched, slightly with irritation, though her expression never changed. Then one senator spoke the sentence that silenced the chamber. Perhaps the throne no longer commands the ancient ships. Even through a damaged public broadcast, Elias could feel the tension instantly. The Queen's silver eyes slowly lifted toward the senator. "Careful," she said softly. The entire Senate chamber became silent. Even Brack muttered, "I think I just became nervous, and she's not even talking to me." Elias smirked faintly. "She does have that effect." The broadcast ended moments later, but the image remained in Elias' mind longer than expected, not because she was beautiful, though she was, not because she looked powerful, though she clearly was. It was because she looked tired, not physically, the kind of exhaustion that came from watching people lose faith in you. Brack suddenly slapped the control panel. "Elias, so we sell this information." Elias kept staring at the dark stars outside. "No." Brack blinked. "No. We use it." The large alien trader nearly choked. "Use it?" "Elias, that region eats military fleets." "Exactly," Elias replied calmly, "which means nobody expects an idiot with a broken cargo ship to enter it." The navigation unit interrupted immediately. "Clarification, the ship is not broken." Elias looked upward. "Oh, wonderful. Then why does the engine scream every morning?" "That is you screaming every morning." Brock rubbed both hands over his face. "I should leave before your stupidity becomes contagious." Probably wise. But Brock did not leave immediately. He stared at Elias for several long seconds. "You're serious?" Elias slowly stood from the pilot chair and walked toward the front window of the ship. Far beyond the station lights, the stars near the grave spiral looked distorted, twisted into strange dark patterns by gravitational storms. Somewhere inside that darkness sat the most wanted ship in the galaxy, and somehow Elias already knew he was going there. "I'm tired of hauling garbage between dying moons," he said quietly. "Maybe it's time I do something incredibly irresponsible." The navigation unit answered at once. "Based on your history, that is statistically inevitable." The ship entered the outer edge of the grave spiral 3 days later with all the confidence of a spoon approaching a black hole. Red warning symbols flooded the cockpit immediately. Gravitational distortion detected. Magnetic storm activity critical. Possible reality fractures ahead. Elias stared at the screen. "Possible what fractures?" The navigation unit responded calmly. "Reality fractures." "That sounds fake." "Unfortunately, physics remains operational." Outside the ship, space itself looked wrong. The stars stretched unnaturally across darkness like glowing paint, dragged by invisible fingers. Massive storms of blue plasma rotated around dead planets while the wrecks of ancient ships drifted silently between asteroid fields. One enormous cruiser floated upside down. Nearby, split completely in half. Elias slowly pointed toward it. See, that's exactly the kind of motivational environment I was hoping for. The ship suddenly shook violently as invisible gravitational waves slammed against the hull. Warning: hull pressure destabilizing. A metal panel exploded from the ceiling behind Elias. He sighed heavily. I miss ordinary problems like debt. The navigation unit paused. You still have debt? Thank you for protecting my optimism. The deeper they traveled, the stranger the grave spiral became. Civilian signals vanished completely. Navigation systems failed every few hours. Once Elias passed a station floating in complete darkness with every window illuminated from inside. No ships, no transmissions, just lights. As they drifted past the station slowly, hundreds of silhouettes suddenly appeared behind the window. Simultaneously, Elias froze. Did those people just move? Unknown, the navigation unit answered. One silhouette lifted an arm. Elias immediately accelerated away. Nope. Absolutely not. We are not investigating haunted space stations today. Several hours later, the battered cargo ship approached a hidden checkpoint built into the hollow center of a shattered asteroid. Massive weapon turrets rotated slowly toward Elias as pirate vessels surrounded the entrance. A distorted voice echoed through the cockpit. Speakers, identify yourself. Elias pressed the comm button carefully. Independent cargo operator. Pause. What kind of cargo? Elias looked around the nearly empty ship. Emotional damage and poor financial decisions. Silence filled the channel. Then, unexpectedly, laughter erupted through several pirate frequencies. One pirate finally answered. Human, your ship looks like falling debris. Thank you, I maintain it badly on purpose. Proceed. The checkpoint. Defenses powered down. Elias blinked in surprise after the transmission ended. That worked. The navigation unit responded instantly. Your incompetence appears strategically effective. Inside the asteroid city, chaos lived openly. Neon lights covered giant metal towers built directly into the rock walls. Smugglers, bounty hunters, and cybernetic mercenaries crowded narrow platforms suspended above endless depths. Alien music thundered through the station while armed patrol drones drifted overhead scanning faces. Elias stepped carefully through the crowded market wearing an old mechanic jacket covered in grease stains. Nobody paid attention to him. That worried him more than being noticed. Reptilian merchant shouted from a nearby booth. Fresh plasma rifles only. Slightly explosive. Another voice screamed somewhere behind him. Then came an explosion. Nobody reacted. Elias nodded slowly. I'm beginning to understand local culture. As he moved deeper into the station, giant holographic screens displayed wanted notices from across the galaxy. Queen Liara's image appeared repeatedly beside the stolen Solaris crown. Even through grainy pirate broadcasts, she looked impossibly composed. Pale silver eyes, long elegant ears, white blonde hair falling over polished armor lined with glowing royal symbols. Below her image flashed the reward amount. Elias stopped walking. That is an unreasonable amount of money. The navigation unit whispered through his hidden earpiece, statistically speaking, you would still spend it. Irresponsibly. True. Suddenly 2 armed mercenaries slammed a terrified prisoner against a wall. Nearby, the prisoner wore an Imperial officer uniform. Tell us where the Queen sent the recovery fleets, one mercenary snarled. The officer spat blood onto the floor. I'd rather die. The mercenary aimed a plasma pistol directly at his head. Elias sighed. Quietly, oh come on, I just got here. Before his brain could stop him, he stepped forward. You know, Elias said loudly, threatening people in public is rude. The mercenaries turned slowly toward him. One of them laughed immediately. And who exactly are you? Elias looked down at himself thoughtfully. At the moment, a man making terrible decisions. The larger mercenary lifted his weapon. Then suddenly alarms erupted throughout the market. Warning, docking, collision detected. A cargo freighter smashed into the upper station platforms nearby, sending explosions across the district. Crowds scattered instantly in panic. Elias grabbed the stunned officer and pulled him behind cover. The mercenary shouted furiously, you caused this. Elias stared at the burning wreckage overhead. Honestly, probably not this time. The explosion above the market sent burning debris raining across the station platforms. Neon signs flickered violently while frightened crowds stampeded through the corridors. Elias pulled the injured Imperial officer behind a collapsed food stand, just as plasma fire tore across the wall beside them. You picked an inconvenient time to get captured, Elias muttered. The officer stared at him in disbelief. Who are you currently? Someone regretting basic human empathy. Another explosion shook the platform. The officer wore damaged black Imperial armor beneath a torn cloak. Purple blood dripped from a wound across his shoulder. Unlike most Imperial soldiers Elias had seen, this one looked exhausted rather than arrogant. You should leave, the officer warned quietly. The cartel controls this entire district. Elias glanced around. The burning market. Yes, I gathered that when the vegetables exploded. Above them, armed drones swept through the smoke, searching for survivors. Red scanner beams crossed the streets while automated voices echoed through the station. Sector lockdown initiated. The officer grabbed Elias' arm. Suddenly, they're moving the Solaris crown. Elias froze. What? Tomorrow. The officer struggled to breathe evenly. Deeper into the spiral to the hollow reach. Even hearing the name felt wrong. Everybody feared the grave spiral, but inside the spiral existed darker places, whispered about only by smugglers and dying prisoners. The hollow reach was one of them. Elias leaned closer. Why move it? The officer hesitated, then he whispered, because they finally broke. Part of it, a deep metallic sound, suddenly echoed through the station. Not an alarm, not an engine, something larger, something ancient. The entire asteroid city vibrated faintly. Even the cartel soldiers nearby stopped moving for a moment. Elias slowly looked upward toward the distant industrial sectors buried deeper inside the asteroid. What was that? The officer's face turned pale. The ship. Before Elias could ask another question, several armed mercenaries appeared through the smoke at the end of the corridor. There, one shouted, the Imperial rat. Is alive, Elias sighed heavily. You know, I miss the days when nobody wanted to shoot me. The officer tried standing but nearly collapsed immediately. Elias grabbed him before he fell. You humans are insane, the officer muttered. Correct. Blaster fire exploded toward them. Elias dragged the officer through a side maintenance tunnel while plasma bolts burned holes into the walls behind them. Steam burst from damaged pipes overhead. The navigation unit spoke calmly through Elias' earpiece. You are currently being hunted by 12 armed criminals. 12, correction 14. Elias kept running. Why do you always count them? I enjoy accuracy. The tunnel opened into an abandoned repair bay, filled with dismantled mining drones. Old robotic arms hung from the ceiling, like metal skeletons frozen in darkness. Elias finally dropped behind cover. Breathing heavily, the officer stared at him suspiciously. You're not military. That obvious. You move like a smuggler. Thank you. That was not a compliment. Elias peeked carefully toward the tunnel entrance. Voices echoed closer. The mercenaries were searching room by room. One of them yelled, "We'll find the human too." Elias blinked. They know about me already. The officer looked genuinely confused. You don't know what? The cartel has been searching for a human mechanic for days. Elias stared at him silently. That feels extremely concerning. Suddenly, lights flickered across the repair bay. A massive holographic projection activated above them without warning. Queen Lyra appeared in shimmering blue light. Both men froze immediately. The hologram was part of an old emergency transmission system, distorted and damaged with static interference. Yet even broken technology struggled to diminish her presence. She stood inside a war room surrounded by star maps and fleet commanders. Silver royal armor reflected soft blue light across her pale face. Her long, elegant ears extended through strands of white blonde hair resting over one shoulder. We lost another fleet near Hollow Reach. One commander reported grimly. Another officer spoke carefully. Your Majesty, perhaps recovery is no longer possible. Queen Lyra remained silent for several seconds, then she answered quietly. The Solaris crown is not merely a ship. The room fell completely still. It carries the memory vaults of our first rulers. If the cartel unlocks its core, her silver eyes hardened slightly. Entire star systems will burn. The transmission glitched violently, then disappeared. Silence filled the repair bay. Even the wounded officer looked shaken. Elias slowly leaned back against the wall. Well, he muttered softly. That sounds significantly worse than I expected. The navigation unit responded immediately. Your survival probability continues to decline. Thank you, very uplifting. Outside the repair bay, footsteps grew louder. The mercenaries were close now. Elias looked toward the officer, so he whispered, How do you feel about terrible ideas? The wounded officer stared at Elias as blaster fire echoed closer through the tunnels. I hate terrible ideas, he whispered. Perfect, Elias replied. That means you still have survival instincts. The officer looked down at the scattered repair drones around them. Please tell me your plan involves escaping. Elias grabbed a rusted control tablet from a nearby workbench and blew dust off the screen. My plan involves confusion Escaping is a secondary objective, that is not. Reassuring, it never is. The navigation unit suddenly spoke. Through Ilya's earpiece, hostile. Targets entering repair bay in 12 seconds. Ilya's activated the ancient repair system. Half the room immediately came alive with violent mechanical noises. Suspended robotic arms jerked awake overhead while welding lasers ignited across the bay. The officer blinked in confusion. What did you just activate? I honestly don't know. That explains a lot about you. The tunnel doors burst open. 4 cartel mercenaries stormed inside with plasma rifles raised. Then the repair drones attacked everything indiscriminately. One robotic arm grabbed a mercenary by the leg and hurled him into a wall hard enough to dent metal. Another drone sprayed industrial coolant directly into someone's face. The entire room erupted into chaos. Ilya's calmly stepped aside as a spinning welding laser nearly removed his head. I should mention, he shouted over the noise, this place may be slightly unsafe. That information would have helped. Earlier, the officer yelled. A mercenary fired wildly while slipping across leaking coolant. Another screamed as maintenance drones chased him through the bay with oversized cutting tools. Ilya's pointed toward a side corridor. Run now, laugh later. I don't think I'll laugh at any part of this. Understandable. They sprinted through the side corridor, while explosions echoed behind them. The station lights flickered repeatedly as power systems struggled to stabilize. Somewhere deep inside the asteroid city, that same enormous metallic sound echoed. Again. Lower, this time closer. The walls vibrated faintly. The officer's expression darkened immediately. They're activating another section of the Solaris crown. You keep saying that like it's catastrophic. It is catastrophic. Ilya's slowed slightly. Can the ship really destroy systems? The officer hesitated. The Solaris crown was built before the modern empire existed. Nobody fully understands its technology anymore. That seems like poor engineering. It's older than our recorded history. That seems like worse engineering. They finally reached an abandoned transit platform suspended over a massive vertical shaft running through the asteroid's core. Endless traffic lanes crossed through darkness while cargo elevators moved between glowing industrial sectors. Below, far beneath them, Ilya saw it for the first time. A gigantic silver structure hidden inside the asteroid, the Solaris crown, even partially obscured by scaffolding and industrial machinery. The ship looked impossibly massive. Its surface glowed faintly beneath layers of restraints and magnetic stabilizers. Strange symbols pulsed slowly across the hull like veins beneath skin. Ilya stared silently. That is not a ship, he whispered. Officer nodded weakly. Now you understand why the Queen refuses to abandon it. Even from this distance, the vessel felt alive somehow, watching, listening. The navigation unit interrupted quietly. Energy readings from the vessel are inconsistent with known Imperial technology. Ilya's kept staring downward, meaning I would prefer to leave. That might be the most emotional thing you've ever said. Suddenly armed footsteps echoed behind them again. More mercenaries. The officer cursed under his breath. They tracked us. Ilya's glanced around quickly. There was nowhere left to run except the transit rail suspended above the abyss. That's unfortunate. One mercenary stepped onto the platform, aiming directly at Elias. Hands where I can see them. Elias raised his hand slowly. Before we continue, he asked politely, how negotiable is this execution? The mercenary ignored him, then suddenly, every light inside the asteroid city turned white, not bright, blinding. Deep pulse thundered through the entire station. The Solaris crown awakened. Further below, massive energy waves erupted outward from the silver vessel, shutting down weapons, drones, and entire sectors instantly. Sparks exploded from ceiling panels as systems collapsed around them. The mercenaries' plasma rifle died in his hands. Everyone froze. Then a voice echoed across every communication frequency inside the station. Cold, ancient, artificial. Unauthorized restraint detected. The officer's face lost all color. Elias slowly looked downward toward the enormous silver ship. The voice continued, royal vessel awaiting command. Authority. Several cartel ships in nearby docking sectors suddenly exploded without warning. People began screaming throughout the station. The mercenaries panicked. Immediately, what did they activate? That thing's alive. We need to evacuate. Elias stared downward in disbelief while the silver globe beneath the asteroid intensified. Then his earpiece crackled. A new voice appeared, female. Calm, Queen Lyrie. Unknown human operative, she said, through heavy static. If you can hear this transmission, leave immediately. Elias blinked. The Queen continued, speaking quietly. The Solaris crown is beginning to recognize unauthorized interference. If the ship fully awakens before control is restored. Static consumed half her sentence. 1. Entire grave spiral may collapse. The transmission cut out. Silence followed. Then Elias looked back down toward the enormous glowing vessel beneath the asteroid city. And despite every intelligent survival instinct in his body, he smiled slightly. Oh, he whispered, this is becoming a very bad idea. The asteroid city was falling apart. Emergency sirens screamed through every sector while thousands of smugglers and mercenaries rushed toward docking bays. In blind panic, entire power grids failed one after another as waves of silver energy pulsed outward from the Solaris crown deep below the station. Elias watched another cartel gunship lose power and spiral directly into a refinery tower. The explosion lit the darkness beneath the asteroid like artificial sunrise. Well, Elias muttered. The locals seemed stressed. The wounded officer grabbed his arm. Urgently, we need to leave now. But Elias kept staring downward toward the giant silver vessel. Something about the ship felt wrong, not dangerous. Lonely, the thought itself sounded ridiculous. The navigation unit suddenly interrupted. Through his earpiece, multiple hostile signatures approaching rapidly. Of course they are. Heavy footsteps echoed behind them. This time the mercenaries were not alone. A tall figure emerged onto the transit platform surrounded by armed guards in black armor marked with glowing crimson symbols. Unlike the others, he moved calmly despite the chaos around him. Commander Valor. Even before speaking, he carried the presence of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. A long scar crossed one side of his pale face, and mechanical implants glowed faintly beneath the skin. Near his eyes, he studied Elias. Silently, then unexpectedly. He smiled. So, Valor said quietly. The human finally appears. Elias blinked once. That sentence concerns me deeply. The mercenaries raised their weapons. Again, but Valor lifted one hand calmly. No shooting. One guard looked confused. Commander. Valor kept his eyes fixed on Elias. If I wanted him dead, he would already be dead. Elias folded his arms. Carefully, that is somehow comforting and threatening simultaneously. The wounded officer beside Elias whispered nervously, "You need to run." Currently evaluating that option. Valor slowly approached the edge of the platform overlooking the Solaris crown. Below. You know why the Empire failed? He asked. Elias shrugged. Budget issues. Valor ignored the joke. They sent fleets, armies, admirals. His mechanical eye glowed faintly. Brighter but ancient technology does not answer to power alone. Below them, another wave of silver energy surged across the station. Solaris crown almost seemed to react to Valor's voice. Elias narrowed his eyes slightly. You're trying to control it. Valor smiled faintly. No, I'm trying to wake it. The officer beside Elias stepped backward in horror. You're insane, he whispered. Possibly, Valor admitted calmly, but history rarely remembers cautious men. Then he turned toward Elias again. You entered the grave spiral alone. You crossed criminal sectors. Military fleets couldn't survive. Valor studied him carefully. Do you know what makes you different from them? Elias sighed. Poor life choices. For once, Valor said softly, you are correct. Suddenly, the entire asteroid trembled violently. A massive section of the Solaris crown became visible beneath the station as industrial restraints exploded outward like shattered chains. Silver light flooded the abyss below. Everyone on the platform instinctively stepped backward, everyone except Valor. The ancient commander looked almost emotional. Magnificent, he whispered. Then all station screens activated. Simultaneously, Queen Lyra appeared across every display. Unlike earlier broadcasts, she no longer looked merely exhausted. She looked furious. Silver armor covered her shoulders while holographic battle maps rotated behind her aboard an Imperial flagship bridge. Her pale face remained composed, but her silver eyes burned with cold intensity. Valor, she said calmly, this ends now. The commander smiled, clears throat slightly at the screen. Your Majesty. Elias noticed something strange. Immediately, no fear, no hatred. The two clearly knew each other well. You abandoned the old ways, Valor continued. The Solaris crown belongs to rulers strong enough to command fear. Again, Queen Lyra's long, pale ears twitched slightly with restrained anger. It belongs to the Empire. It belongs to destiny. It belongs, she answered coldly, to me. The transmission cut abruptly. Several cartel soldiers shifted nervously. Even Elias felt the tension. Then the navigation unit spoke quietly into his ear. Imperial fleet signatures detected. Entering the gray spiral. Valor heard it too. He smiled again. Perfect timing. Suddenly, the entire transit platform locked down around Elias and the officer. Energy barriers erupted from the floor, trapping them instantly. Elias looked around. Oh, that seems unfair. Valor turned calmly toward him. You're coming with me, human. And if I refuse? You won't. Two guards grabbed the wounded officer. Violently, Elias immediately stepped forward. Easy. Valor studied him silently for several seconds, then he spoke softly. The Solaris crown reacted when you arrived. Elias froze. What? You heard the voice. Valor's mechanical eye flickered. Faintly. The ship noticed you. That feels medically concerning. Valor almost laughed. And GT snorts. And GT, for the first time since meeting him. The commander actually looked interested, rather than hostile. You still don't understand, do you? He asked quietly. Below them, the gigantic silver vessel pulsed again, and somewhere deep inside the ancient ship, something awakened fully. The Solaris crown awakened like a star being born. Silver light exploded through the asteroid city as ancient systems came alive beneath layers of shattered restraints. Entire docking sectors tore apart while cartel ships lost control and crashed into one another across the darkness of the grave spiral. Elias barely kept his footing as the transit platform shook violently. Every screen around them suddenly filled with unfamiliar symbols. Then the ancient voice returned. Royal bloodline detected. Queen Lyra's fleet emerged from hyperspace at that exact moment. Massive Imperial warships burst through the distorted stars, surrounding the grave spiral, their engines illuminating the darkness like blue suns. Thousands of fighters swarmed forward, immediately toward the collapsing asteroid city. Baylor smiled calmly while chaos erupted around him. At last, he whispered. The Solaris crown began moving, not flying. Waking, the enormous silver vessel slowly separated from the asteroid itself while entire station sectors collapsed around it. Ancient metallic structures unfolded across the hull like wings stretching after centuries of sleep. Elias stared upward in disbelief. That thing is absolutely too large to exist. The navigation unit answered instantly. Agreed. Suddenly, the energy barriers trapping Elias vanished as power systems overloaded. Without hesitation, Elias grabbed the wounded officer and pulled him behind cover just as explosions ripped across the platform. Baylor turned sharply toward him. Stop him, he shouted. Mercenaries opened fire immediately. Blaster bolts tore through the collapsing station while Elias dragged the officer toward a descending maintenance lift leading directly toward the Solaris crown below. You have a plan, the officer yelled. No, that is becoming a pattern. Lift dropped violently through smoke and falling debris toward the giant silver vessel beneath them. Around them, the battle intensified as Imperial fighters clashed with cartel ships across the spiral. Then Queen Lyra herself appeared through the lift's holographic communication panel. For the first time, Elias saw her outside official broadcast. She looked exhausted, furious, and terrified all at once. Her silver eyes locked directly onto his. You're alive, Elias blinked in surprise. That sounded almost emotional. This is not the time for jokes. That usually means it's the perfect time for jokes. Behind her, Imperial officers rushed through the command bridge desperately, shouting status reports. The Solaris crown is activating the Stargate core. Energy levels still rising. We cannot stop it, Queen Lyra ignored everyone else. Listen carefully, she said to Elias. The ship recognizes Adaptive command behavior. I understood maybe 4 of those words. It responded to you because you acted unpredictably. Ancient royal vessels were designed to reject rigid military thinking. Elias stared at her. You're telling me the galaxy's most advanced ship likes idiots? One officer behind the Queen muttered. That explains the old emperors. Even Lyrie almost smiled then. Her expression darkened again. And GT, clears throat. And GT, if Valor reaches the core chamber. First, he'll open the ancient war gates. The entire lift shook violently below. Then the Solaris crown continued, unfolding like a living machine. Awakening from a nightmare. Elias exhaled slowly. Right. Terrible idea time. The lift doors opened directly into the ship. The interior looked nothing like modern technology. Vast silver corridors curved organically beneath glowing symbols flowing across the walls like liquid light. The air itself hummed softly with ancient energy. Even the navigation unit sounded unsettled. This vessel predates several known civilizations. Wonderful, I already feel underqualified. Alarms suddenly echoed behind them. Valor's forces were entering the ship. Elias pushed the wounded officer toward an emergency console. Can you contact the fleet? The officer nodded weakly. What about you? Elias looked deeper into the glowing corridors ahead. I'm going to speak with the world's angriest spaceship. The core chamber resembled a cathedral built inside a star. Massive streams of silver energy rotated around a floating crystal structure suspended above an endless abyss. Valor stood before it with several guards already dead around him, their bodies burned by uncontrolled energy surges. He turned slowly as Elias entered. You shouldn't have come. Elias looked around nervously. That sentence has followed me all week. The crystal pulsed brighter. The ancient voice echoed. Again, command authority unresolved. Valor stepped toward the core. The Empire became weak, afraid. I will restore what we were. And by restore, Elias said carefully, you mean probably destroy half the galaxy. Sacrifice is necessary. Elias sighed. People who say that are almost never volunteering themselves. Valor attacked instantly. The fight was brutal and desperate. Across collapsing platforms while silver energy storms erupted around them. Elias was not stronger, not faster, but he was unpredictable. He threw tools instead of punches, triggered unstable consoles. At one point, he smashed a floating service drone directly into Valor's face. The navigation unit sounded offended. That drone was expensive. Eventually, Valor reached for the core itself, and the Solaris crown rejected him. Silver energy exploded outward violently, throwing him backward into the abyss below. Silence followed. Then the ancient ship spoke one final time. Command authority recognized. The silver light softened instantly. Moments later, the Solaris crown emerged peacefully from the collapsing grave. Spiral beside Queen Lyrie's fleet. The war ended before sunrise. Weeks later, the imperial capital overflowed with celebration. Citizens crowded enormous streets beneath glowing towers, while the restored Solaris crown floated silently above the planet like a second moon. Elias stood awkwardly in borrowed formal clothing, surrounded by senators, officers, and nobles staring at him like he might accidentally explode. That Possibility remains statistically reasonable, the navigation unit whispered in his ear. Queen Lyrie approached through the crowd, wearing silver royal armor beneath flowing white fabric. Her long pale ears emerged through loose white blonde hair. Illuminated by the city lights, the entire plaza became silent. Elias opened his mouth carefully. So nobody's trying to arrest me. Lyrie stopped directly in front of him. Several senators suggested it. That feels unfair after everything. I refused. Then before millions of watching citizens and stunned military commanders, the Queen stepped forward and embraced him tightly. The crowd gasped. Elias froze completely. I was not emotionally prepared for this. For the first time since they met, Lyrie laughed openly, warmly, not like a queen, like a person finally allowed to breathe again. You crossed the grave spiral alone, she whispered. You returned what my empire could not. Elias looked out across the glowing capital and the massive silver ship floating peacefully overhead. Weeks ago, he had been a broke cargo pilot hiding from debt collectors on dying mining moons. Now the most powerful woman in the galaxy was smiling at him in front of an entire empire. He still did not fully understand how that happened. Honestly, neither did anyone else, and somehow that made the story even better.